Hi, this is Emily Iannielli, and I am male to female, transgender. Next week is going to be kind of a surreal week. Scheduled to do surgery on guess what day? It's not a good day, but hopefully everything will work out. September 11th, which is the 18th anniversary of the horrible events that took place. Still, I remember it as if it just happened yesterday. And I am planning to discuss in another video my thoughts about that. I've done a few, and I also did a picture slideshow as well. So I might create a new one, as I like to put projects together. So Wednesday next week is a big week. Hopefully everything will go well. I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't nervous, because I am. But it's something I've been dealing with my whole life, basically, and hoping for. So I have an appointment today with my psychiatrist, and tomorrow I have to get my liver function tested. Yesterday I also had that, the liver function. They're concerned about the concentration of enzymes in my liver, and I believe it has to do with my regimen of medication these past 7 years. So a good amount of medicines that I was taking for depression and mood fluctuations, I had to be taken off of that. So I'm basically on a half a dozen medications, whereas before I was on over a dozen, maybe like 14 medications. So they drastically took me down on the medication. And I do have some withdrawals, I guess, in trying to deal with it, because they took me off immediately. Usually they wean you off. Unfortunately, they took me off immediately. So I hope my liver function is improving. These are factors beyond my control. But this is going to be the 6th try, so hopefully it'll work out. Just kind of not so keen on having it on September 11th. But at least I don't have to watch the TV and see that whole memorial service play out. I remember last year when I was in the psych hospital, we had that on the TV, but I was in between going to appointments with nurses, doctors. That's what they usually do when you're in the hospital, especially a psych hospital, for like 2 days, 3 days. You have to speak with lots of people. So last year I was in the hospital, and it's ironic that this year I'll be in a hospital, but a different one, not a psych hospital, a regular hospital where they do surgeries and stuff like that. So I'm, gonna try my best to deal with all that comes along with surgery, recovery. Unfortunately, I'll have to get other of Matthew's caseworkers involved to get him out and do things, because usually I'm there to do that. But when I'm recovering, it's going to be nearly impossible. I won't even be able to drive for a couple of months. So there's a lot involved. And, it's kind of difficult for most people to grasp why someone would want to undergo such a surgery. But if they stepped into the shoes of a transgender person and lived basically all your life feeling like you were out of place and kind of hiding from people and not really opening up, being closed off like I was. I had a difficult time trying to deal with life and talk to individuals, but I was fortunate that I met some good people. In my early youth, I was a ball player, Little League, where I played shortstop or second base, and I was a good contact hitter, and I became popular. I even won trophies. And then we moved to Long Island, and my playing days were over. Brooklyn I loved because I had tons of friends. Long Island was totally different because it's not like you know everybody in the neighborhood like you did in Brooklyn. I knew all the people on my block, and we're talking like 15 houses, and we knew each other as if we were all friends. And I remember there was a deaf man that lived across the street, and I tried my best to communicate with him. I didn't know sign language, and sadly I never learned it, but I definitely appreciate that people do learn it so they can communicate with deaf people. That's something that I might try to learn because of my inability due to my mental struggles and depression, bipolar disorder. I'm unable to work. My psychiatrist suggested that I'm permanently disabled based on all that I struggle with and suffer through, mainly my bipolar and depression. But then when you add transgender into the mix, it only makes it more complex and complicated, and people unfortunately don't value or appreciate the significance of depression, that it is a legitimate illness and it affects lots of people, and sadly it's one of the biggest causes to suicide. I know my father was extremely depressed, and sadly he went through a lot of difficulties in his line of work as an iron worker. He lost friends in the business. There was a time when he was working on the Verrazano Bridge where he actually was involved trying to save his friend, someone who was a colleague of his, and they had just had a conversation briefly right before and they took on their tasks. And then my dad heard shrieks from somebody nearby. He turned around, and to his horror, he saw his buddy like hanging on for dear life. So my father reacted quickly, ran over there, tried to grab his friend and colleague by the hands. Unfortunately, my father had damaged hands through other construction-related accidents, so he didn't have a good grip, and he saw his friend fall to his death, and my dad would have went over as well if it wasn't for the quick actions of another iron worker, an Indian from the Canadian reservation that worked in New York, and he pulled my father back and kept him safe. And my dad had survivor's guilt after that, and then he started drinking to deal with all the pain he went through. And I remember he always struggled with that. Survivor's guilt is a terrible thing to have to deal with. Unfortunately, that was something my dad had to live with, and plus my dad lost his wife, my mom, many, many years before he died. 19 years, and he was never the same after that. It was a very difficult time growing up. I was I was an adult. I was 29 when I lost my mom. My sisters were younger. My sister Kathy was 27, and my sister Joan was 23. So we were all young adults, and it was difficult. And my mom was sick through the years, even through our youth, teenage years, but she managed to deal with it, and she even worked when she was able to. Unfortunately, she had lapses with her depression and manic depression, which is another way of saying bipolar disorder. And she also suffered from paranoia and schizophrenia. I am also kind of isolated, and I have a lot of social anxiety. And it's sad because I'm finally happy living my truth, but I'm more isolated than I've ever been. I haven't worked in a number of years, whereas when I was in my former life, I was working. I was accepted by people. My sisters would invite us to various occasions, but when I came out, it all changed. I lost so many friends. I lost my job, and it seemed like no matter how hard I tried to get back into the workforce, it was virtually impossible. I've been discriminated against, and people say, why don't you enlist an attorney? But I really had no proof of that. Attorneys go by hard facts, and you can't make suppositions, so there really wasn't a leg I could stand on. Plus it would be my word against their word, so I just didn't want to deal with that process. You know, but I am, living my truth. I'm happy. I lost a lot of friends, but I've gained a lot of friends too. But obviously I only see them on a not on a regular basis. I have a handful of friends that I see regularly, but most of my friends are distant friends. I even have a friend in England who actually is also in my situation, male to female. She's done a few surgeries and she seems happy. She's much younger too than I am. But all I can do is just take one day at a time, as they say. I'm not making any big, like you heard it, everybody heard that, take one day at a time. So I'm not offering like great wisdom, that's just what people say. But I do write, and I do like to do videos because it's my way of expressing myself. Because when you're isolated, it's much harder to be out and be a part of something. When you work amongst coworkers, you develop friendships, but also in the working world it is cutthroat. And there are cliques and office politics and cutthroats and dealing with overbearing bosses. Plus in accounting, tax season is very stressful. And I lost the opportunity to spend more time with my son, which really bothers me. So I have to try to spend more time with him now. The problem is, now he's a young adult. He wants to have independence, but sadly, as an autistic young adult, it's very complicated. Years ago I used to write in a blog about the relationship between me and my son and autism and how it affected us and the family, and my wife especially, because she gave birth to Matthew, and it's very difficult for her to come to terms with it, and that's why we never did have a second child, because autism is a very difficult thing to have to go through for the individual, and it does impact the family as well. So autism is something that I want to focus on as well and discuss, but I have to be careful because my son is very sensitive to that. So, but I'm only trying to help him, and we face the reality that he will most likely wind up in a group home, and I can't afford to live here much longer. My real estate taxes keep going up. I don't even get the full benefit of the deduction anymore, and it really sucks, and I'm scared that because of that, homes in Long Island, especially my home, are going to be more difficult to sell because the real estate taxes are high here. Plus, people who work also pay New York State withholding taxes. So now that the president, in his infinite wisdom and his many lies, tried to convince us that this was a tax relief for the middle class, which is a complete lie, a complete fallacy, and I blame him and the Republican Party because they took away my personal exemptions. I had 4, which would reduce my taxable income by like $16,000 for 4 personal exemptions that were suddenly taken away. They limited my real estate and local and state taxes to $10,000, and last year we had a normal deduction of $18,000, so that's $8,000 that they took away. So you tell me how that's a benefit to the middle class, because I've paid more tax last year than I ever did. So they're just a bunch of liars. They only cater to the rich and their base, and I'm kind of fed up, and I hope that we have new leadership in 2020, because I can't stand the way this country is going right now. But this is not a political discussion. This is just my personal feelings. You know, I had to delete many tweets where I was critical of Trump because they threatened to close my account, and they gave me warnings. So I've been deleting all my criticisms. I thought we lived in a world where we had freedom of speech and freedom of expression, yet he can go and tear apart his competitors or people he doesn't like because they don't support him. He's allowed to do that on Twitter, but I can't make any criticisms of him when he is very mean. He discriminates. He bans transgender people from the military, which upsets me because I'm transgender. So, and he also says that businesses, for religious reasons, can discriminate against transgender people because their religions base their whole premise on people who are male and female distinct, and there's no in between. And that, to me, is hypocritical, not only of the president, but also the church. And that's why now I go to the Mormon church, because I feel more accepted and wanted. Unfortunately, when I have surgery, if everything proves okay with my liver, I will have to recover over a period of time. So I'm going to lose that being able to go to the church and, you know, see the people who I've developed relationships with. But I'm gonna, you know, do my best so I can heal quick and then resume to dealing with the issues I'm concerned about for my son. The thing about life is it's heartbreaking. We all know that our children have to grow up, you know, and most of my friends realize that too, but their children are going to college, they're graduating, they may even go on for post-education. You know, some are doctors, some are lawyers, some are professionals. Unfortunately, that's not the direction my son is going in, and I'm not trying to be critical or anything, just concerned and a little bit disappointed. But, you know, all I can do is try to just come to terms with it. You know, and the fact is that if I have to move, because I can't afford these increasing real estate taxes, and now that I can't even get a full benefit for what I pay, it really makes no sense here. Like I said, though, it's going to be harder to sell this house. first of all, because it needs a lot of renovations that I can't afford. And second of all, you don't get the full benefit now of your real estate taxes. And if they keep increasing and you're only allowed 10,000, and people do have state withholding, so they're losing a big deduction on their Schedule A. You know, I knew right away this was going to be a big problem because they eliminated personal exemptions too. So that means I had to pay a lot more tax, and we're not talking like a lot of income. I live on a fixed income. Disability is even taxable. Long-term disability, thankfully, isn't, but Social Security disability is. And we still have to pay because of my wife's income and her number of dependents she claims. So it's very difficult. I knew right from the start that this was going to be a big problem for us because I am a CPA, so I know all about the laws that I've learned, and I can't profess to the fact that I know about the existing laws now on the books with all these changes, but I do know that they hurt a lot of people. I'm kind of, you know, focusing on this political stuff, but I really don't want to. But, you know, life is much different for me. You know, I feel isolated, I get depressed, and the irony is that I'm much happier as a person, and I was naive. I thought that people would embrace me, accept me, that I could have a fulfilling career now as a woman, but that's just not the case. And the sad reality is a lot of people like myself do struggle, but there is a silver lining because there are many transgender individuals, women, men, who are extremely successful. And I wish I could tap into something where I could also experience being successful. I was very good as an accountant. I was competent. But unfortunately, with the way things are today, my life has been turned upside down. People say maybe I should do volunteer work. That's all fine and good. But to drive and have to pay for gas and tolls, I mean not tolls, but gas, and you know, putting my time in for no compensation whatsoever is kind of a difficult thing to have to deal with. It's kind of frustrating, and as much as I want to volunteer and help people, I am limited in what I can do. I don't have any background in psychology. You know, I don't even know where I would start to do volunteer work, and it would have to be in the vicinity of where I live currently. And I'm dealing with the fact that my son most likely will wind up in a group home like in Long Island, and if I can't afford to live here, it's going to be hard. The family may even have to break up, which is really bothering me because I can't handle being alone and not being able to see my son if I had to move down south to try to find an affordable lifestyle. And then I'm alone. I wouldn't be able to handle that. You know, I'd rather just not go on. You know, if I couldn't see my son, what's the whole point? You know, lots of people are empty nesters, but they have the ability to see their children who are now adults and benefit because they also experience being grandparents. For me, I have to come to terms with the fact that my son will not have a normal life, and that really upsets me, and I don't know how to deal with that. You know, I wanted him to be a happy, go-lucky, a spirited person. I remember when he was born, I had such high hopes for him and dreams, but those were my dreams and hopes, Matthew, unfortunately, is special needs and will require a special attention all throughout his life. So I won't be able to experience successes like graduating college. I'm not ruling it out, but he'll be in a group home, so he'll be like kind of relegated to the rules, and it's just a hard thing to deal with, and that's what upsets me so much. It upsets me so much to the point where sometimes I just don't feel like going on. I get so depressed. It's like this is temporary, and I'm kind of like trying to accept the reality, and it's very difficult emotionally. We're having a 40-year high school reunion, which I guess I would like to go to, but I have my doubts because, first of all, I don't know how I'll be received. My cross-country reunion was much different because it was a picnic style, and all my cross-country teammates were very accepting of me, and it was a great experience to see Coach because he helped shape me in my high school years. He believed in me. He recruited me for the cross-country and track teams, and he made me feel comfortable, confident, and happy. And I made some friends. I made lots of friends, actually, on the cross-country team, even though I was quiet and shy and somewhat reserved. I still managed to be on a team and do my best, and that's all I could do. My coach didn't care if I was on the JV team. He supported me just as much as he supported the varsity team with the most elite of runners, and we did have some really elite runners that made lots of successes in their races, where I just was lucky enough to finish the race at a respectable time. But to Coach, that didn't matter. He just was concerned that you just do your best, you put your best foot forward, and you run to your heart's ambitions. You push yourself, and that's what he taught me. He taught me how to push myself. He taught me how to believe in myself. He taught me how to accept challenge. He taught me to make friends. And he really made me feel part of a team. And that was priceless. And I love my coach. Unfortunately, as he's getting older, he's not quite the same with his memory, But it was wonderful to see him and his family. His wife, 2 of his 3 kids. His son lives in California, so I met the 2 daughters who are very nice. In fact, the older daughter is a math teacher following in her father's footsteps, because my coach was not only a wonderful coach, but he taught math also. I think trigonometry. Unfortunately, I didn't have him for math, but math was one of my strong subjects ever since kindergarten. And I remember those days when my mom would sit with me at the dining room table in Brooklyn and help me solve my math problems and other subjects. So I was very fortunate. I miss my mom and dad, and the fact that they had tragic ends. And I need to be strong emotionally. I'm not a rock. I have weaknesses. I have frailties. I feel insecure. But I must say that it took me a lot of courage to transition. And I lost in the process, but I've gained too. And I've made new friends. Even though I lost friends, I made new friends. And they're real friends. And I do have some really cool mainstream friends, if that's how you look at it. But they're nice people, and they accept me. My cross-country teammates I love. Some of my high school classmates I love. And that's why I would like to go to the reunion. But also I will be recovering, so physically I may not be up to it. But the other thing that I'm concerned about is that when we enter discussions with our family, about our family life, you know, I don't want to say, oh, my son's autistic, I may have to sell my house because I can't afford to live here, I'm disabled, I'm not working, so I don't have a lot of things that I can be proud of, and that to me is very difficult to deal with. I have to run now because I have a psychiatrist appointment, but it was a pleasure talking, you know, and this is therapy for me because I don't really talk to a lot of people, unfortunately, and the only people I really have contact with are the people that are in the LGBT community, and I'm lucky to have people like that in my court. And I do have some friends that I Facebook with who have been very supportive and helpful. And unfortunately, some of my friends are struggling with the illness and terminal illnesses. So that upsets me, you know, because I am a compassionate and sympathetic person. I've always been that way. And I try my best to help others when I can. When I was working, it was much easier. But now that I'm not, it's much harder. And when I help people, I like to give of my time, I guess like in a voluntary capacity. And if I have a few bucks that I mean like lunch money, when I'm in the city seeing doctors, I will gladly give it to someone struggling. And I don't need to have lunch. I'd rather them have the money, because that's how I was brought up. That was how I was raised, to love people, to respect people, and to just be understanding that there are people struggling, and I'm even struggling, but I'm trying to forge on, and I'm trying to help my son, and I love my wife, and I love her family, and I just want things to work out. It would be a total disaster if my son stayed in Long Island in a group home. My wife and I had to part because it will not be the same. And then I may have to move to a place where I can afford to live since I'm unable to work. And that's difficult. It's a difficult reality for me. And if I had to live alone, away from family, especially my wife and son, my son specifically, because he would think I'm abandoning him, when in reality it's just the fact that I live too far, and it's going to be a difficult thing, and I don't think I can afford a place here. I wouldn't buy anymore. I don't want to deal with another mortgage for the rest of my life. I hate mortgages because they enslave you into 30 years if you're not able to make advance payments. And that's what happened with me. You know, in the beginning when I was working, I could make an extra payment, but I can't now. And I still have 15 years remaining, and that depresses me. And now that I can't get full benefit of real estate taxes and state taxes, why would this community, where we have one of the highest real estate taxes, would want to buy a house here if they're not getting full benefit of their deductions? To me, that's really not fair, but unfortunately, that's the way things are right now. And I don't know, I hope things get better. So, this is Emily. I gotta go, I gotta run. And I'll see you guys sometime soon, I hope. Bye.